All right, listen up. You've probably heard people say, "Oh, they're a bad person." But what does that actually mean? What are the real signs that someone is toxic, manipulative, or just plain bad for your life? Here's the thing. You can't afford to waste time with people who drain you, who lie to you, or who just don't have your best interests at heart. But here's the problem. We don't always recognize those red flags until it's too late. But I'm going to change that for you today. I'm going to give you 8 signs that'll help you spot bad people from a mile away so you can protect yourself and your energy. And trust me, it starts with something you've probably been ignoring, and it's a lot simpler than you think. So let's dive in and take control of your life, starting right now. Let's break this down so you can recognize the signs and take action before it's too late. A bad person often operates by manipulating the emotions of those around them. It's a behavior that can be subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but over time it becomes clear. They use your feelings to control you, to influence your decisions, and ultimately to serve their own interest. It can feel like a slow burn where you start to question your own judgment, your self-worth, and your ability to trust your instincts. But make no mistake, emotional manipulation is one of the key signs of someone with bad intentions, and it's something you need to recognize and address as soon as possible. Emotional manipulation comes in many forms, but one of the most common is guilt tripping. A person who manipulates through guilt will make you feel responsible for their happiness or problems, even though you're not. They might say things like, "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me?" Or, "I thought you cared about me, but clearly I was wrong." This kind of language is designed to make you feel guilty for setting boundaries, for not meeting their needs, or for making decisions that are best for your own well-being. They will play on your sense of compassion, kindness, and empathy, knowing that you'll likely feel compelled to ease their discomfort or fix their problems, even if it means sacrificing your own peace of mind. Another tactic is gaslighting. Gaslighting is a psychological manipulation that causes you to doubt your own perceptions, memories, or sanity. A manipulative person might tell you, "You're overreacting, that never happened," or "You're just too sensitive, that's not what I meant." They twist the truth to make you question your own reality, and eventually you start to feel like you're losing grip on what's real and what's not. Gaslighting is an incredibly insidious form of control because it doesn't involve direct force or threats. Instead, it wears you down, making you feel confused and unsure of yourself. Over time, it can undermine your confidence and erode your trust in your own intuition. Another sign of emotional manipulation is the way these individuals play with your sense of love or affection. They may withhold affection or support as a form of punishment or control. For example, they might give you the silent treatment or act cold and distant whenever they don't get their way. This is done to make you feel insecure and to force you to chase after their approval or affection. It's as if they're saying, "I'll only love you when you meet my conditions, when you do what I want." This creates a dynamic where you're constantly seeking their validation, and the relationship becomes less about mutual respect and more about meeting their needs at the expense of your own. On the flip side, manipulative people may also use over-the-top flattery and love bombing to control you. At the start of a relationship, they might shower you with excessive praise, compliments, or affection, making you feel special and needed. They might say things like, "I've never met anyone like you," or "You're the most amazing person I've ever known." In the beginning, it feels incredible. It feels like they see something in you that no one else does. But eventually, this praise becomes a tool to create a sense of dependency. When they're not praising you, you start to feel unworthy or unsure of yourself. You start to believe that the only way to feel good about who you are is by receiving their approval. This is how they hook you in. And once they've got you, they can start using those emotions to keep you compliant. Some manipulative individuals also use the tactic of unpredictability. One day they might be warm and loving, and the next they're cold or hostile. This creates confusion and makes you constantly on edge, trying to figure out what you need to do to make them happy again. This unpredictability keeps you in a constant state of uncertainty, and your emotional well-being becomes tied to their moods and reactions. You start to walk on eggshells, always wondering when the next emotional storm will hit. This is a classic tactic used by people who want to maintain control over you, because when you're always guessing how to behave around them, you're more likely to comply with their wishes in order to avoid conflict. They may also use your own vulnerabilities against you. If they know your weaknesses or insecurities, they might exploit them to keep you in a position of submission. For instance, if you've shared something personal, like a past trauma or fear, a manipulative person might bring it up in a way that makes you feel ashamed or small. They might say, "I thought you were stronger than that," or "You should be over that by now." These comments are designed to make you feel like you're broken or flawed, and that you need them to heal or fix you. In reality, they're using your vulnerability as a weapon to gain power over you. This emotional manipulation can also take the form of emotional blackmail. They might threaten to harm themselves, spread rumors, or end the relationship if you don't comply with their demands. They make you feel responsible for their well-being, even when you've done nothing wrong. This can be one of the most toxic aspects of emotional manipulation because it's designed to make you feel responsible for their happiness, even at the cost of your own. They may say things like, "If you leave me, I don't know what I'll do," or "You're the only one who understands me." These threats aren't based on genuine care. They're a tactic to control your actions and keep you in their grasp. And then there's the issue of exaggerating or distorting facts to play the victim. A manipulative person may take any situation, no matter how small, and blow it out of proportion in order to gain sympathy or to deflect blame. For example, if they've done something wrong, instead of owning up to it, they might exaggerate how difficult their life is or how much stress they're under, making you feel sorry for them and shifting the focus away from their behavior. By playing the victim, they ensure that they never have to take responsibility for their actions, and you're left feeling like you're the one who should be comforting them. All of these tactics have one thing in common. They are designed to make you feel confused, guilty, insecure, or responsible for someone else's emotions. Over time, they erode your sense of self-worth and can lead you to believe that you can't trust your own feelings, thoughts, or decisions. Emotional manipulation is one of the most dangerous and damaging forms of control because it doesn't leave physical scars, but it does leave deep emotional wounds that can take years to heal. Recognizing these behaviors and understanding how they work is the first step in freeing yourself from the grip of a bad person. One of the hallmark traits of a bad person is their complete inability to take responsibility for their actions. Instead of owning up to their mistakes, shortcomings, or harmful behavior, they will find ways to shift the blame onto others, deflecting attention away from their own failures and projecting their issues onto the people around them. This behavior is not just a minor flaw, it is a consistent pattern that emerges in nearly every aspect of their life. They have an uncanny ability to avoid accountability, and the more you interact with them, the more you'll realize how toxic this trait can be. At its core, a lack of responsibility is a refusal to acknowledge that their actions have consequences. Bad people never seem to learn from their mistakes because they're never forced to face them. If something goes wrong, they will immediately look for someone else to blame, whether it's you, a coworker, a family member, or even an external situation. They might say things like, "It's not my fault, you should have known better," or "You made me do it." This kind of behavior is not just an occasional lapse in judgment, it's a way of life for them. Every failure, every mistake, every problem becomes someone else's fault, and they'll find a way to twist the narrative to make themselves look like the victim or the innocent party in the situation. It can be frustrating, even maddening, to deal with someone like this. No matter how much evidence there is to suggest that their actions were the cause of the problem, they will deny it. They might even become hostile or defensive when confronted, reacting as though you're pointing out their mistakes as an attack on their character. Instead of apologizing or offering a solution, they become argumentative, deflecting and diverting the conversation away from the issue at hand. This makes it nearly impossible to have a productive discussion or resolve any conflicts, because the goal isn't to improve the situation. It's to avoid responsibility at all costs. This behavior often extends to their relationships with others as well. A bad person might never admit that they've hurt someone emotionally, and if they do, it's typically not a genuine apology. Instead, it might sound more like, "I'm sorry you feel that way," or "It's not my fault, you misunderstood." In this case, they are not actually taking responsibility for their actions. They are simply acknowledging that you are upset, but without owning the impact of their behavior. The lack of empathy is staggering because they are unwilling to look at the situation from your perspective. They don't see how their actions have hurt you because they are too focused on justifying their own behavior and avoiding any kind of personal growth or reflection. In professional settings, people like this will avoid responsibility in every way possible. If a project fails, they will point fingers at others or blame the circumstances. They might say the team didn't support me or the market conditions were unfavorable, completely ignoring their own role in the failure. This is particularly damaging in a work environment where teamwork and collaboration are crucial. A bad person's inability to take responsibility can lead to a toxic culture where trust is eroded, and people feel like they cannot depend on each other. When problems arise, instead of working together to find solutions, these individuals will create division, spreading blame and fostering an environment of distrust. What makes this trait even more harmful is how it can warp your perception of reality. You might begin to doubt your own judgment because someone who never takes responsibility for their actions is constantly manipulating the truth. They might tell you that you're remembering things wrong or that you're overreacting. They might even suggest that you're being unreasonable for expecting them to own up to their mistakes. Over time, this can make you second-guess your instincts, and you might start to believe that you're the one in the wrong, even when the evidence clearly points to them. In personal relationships, the inability to take responsibility can manifest as a refusal to engage in meaningful conflict resolution. Instead of addressing issues directly and finding a solution together, they will avoid difficult conversations or change the subject entirely. They will minimize your concerns and make you feel like you're the one creating unnecessary drama. They might say, "You're just too sensitive," or "You're making a big deal out of nothing." This shuts down any attempt to discuss the problem in a healthy, productive way and ensures that the cycle of avoidance continues. Eventually, you might find yourself walking on eggshells trying to avoid confrontation because you know it will never lead to resolution, only more deflection and blame shifting. This lack of accountability also affects their personal growth. Since they never admit to their mistakes, they never learn from them. This creates a never-ending cycle of failure and denial, where they continue to make the same mistakes over and over again. They might convince themselves that they're doing everything right, even though the results suggest otherwise. This inability to reflect on their actions prevents them from evolving as individuals, and it prevents any genuine progress from occurring in their lives. Instead of taking responsibility and making changes, they continue to repeat the same destructive behaviors, dragging everyone else down in the process. At the heart of this is a refusal to be vulnerable. Taking responsibility requires self-awareness and humility, the ability to admit that you are not perfect and that your actions can hurt others. But a bad person's ego won't allow them to show vulnerability. Admitting fault would mean admitting weakness, and they are so driven by their need for control and superiority that they will do anything to maintain the illusion of perfection. The truth is, they are afraid of being exposed, of being seen as flawed or imperfect, so they deflect, deny, and dodge accountability at every turn. This is the dangerous cycle of a bad person. They avoid responsibility, refuse to grow, and continue to hurt others in the process. They will never acknowledge the impact of their actions because doing so would force them to confront their own flaws, and that is something they are unwilling to do. Instead, they keep moving through life with a shield of defensiveness, always finding someone or something else to blame, and always evading the one thing that could truly help them change: their own accountability. A bad person often thrives on tearing down others to build themselves up. This isn't just a one-off behavior, it's a consistent pattern in how they interact with the world. They might act like they're your friend, your ally, or even someone who genuinely cares about your success, but deep down, they are only interested in elevating themselves at your expense. They engage in this behavior because, for them, personal growth and self-worth come from making others feel small, insignificant, or inferior. Their insecurities and self-doubt drive them to seek validation through the degradation of others, and they use this as a way to feel better about themselves, even if it means stepping on others to do so. It often starts in subtle ways. You might notice them making passive-aggressive comments or backhanded compliments, disguised as humor or lighthearted banter. For instance, they might say, "I didn't know you could do that. I'm impressed." Or, "I would never have been able to pull that off. I guess you're just lucky." On the surface, these statements might seem like harmless jokes, but they carry a hidden message that your accomplishments or abilities are somehow less significant or are only due to chance. This type of subtle undermining is a tactic to make you feel insecure, to make you question whether you really are as capable or successful as you think you are. But the passive-aggressive comments are just the beginning. A bad person will often take it a step further by openly belittling others in more direct ways. They might criticize your appearance, your intelligence, your career choices, or even your relationships. The goal is always the same: to make you feel small so they can feel bigger. They might criticize your appearance by saying, "Are you really going to wear that?" Or make disparaging comments about your work by saying, "I wouldn't have done it that way, but I guess it works for you." These remarks are designed to plant seeds of doubt and inferiority, causing you to question your choices and your sense of self-worth. This need to tear others down is especially apparent in how a bad person reacts to your success. Instead of celebrating your achievements or offering genuine congratulations, they will try to downplay them or twist them to make you feel like you haven't truly earned your success. They might say, "Well, I guess you got lucky," or "Anyone could have done that if they had the right connections." They act as though your achievements are somehow less impressive or deserving than others, and they will try to invalidate your hard work, effort, and success. This isn't about them not acknowledging your hard work. It's about ensuring that you don't feel better than them, that you don't outshine them in any way. They want to keep you in a position where you feel like you're always beneath them, even if they have to undermine you to do it. This behavior is often rooted in jealousy and insecurity. A bad person feels threatened by anyone who seems to be doing better than them or who appears more confident or accomplished. Instead of using that jealousy as a source of motivation, they channel it into negative energy that targets those they perceive as more successful. This can lead to them spreading rumors or gossiping behind your back, undermining your reputation, and making it harder for others to see your value or potential. They'll use every opportunity to make you look bad, not because of any personal grievances, but simply because seeing you succeed makes them feel inadequate. The desire to build themselves up at the expense of others can also manifest as a constant need to one-up everyone around them. They have to always be the center of attention, the one with the most impressive story, the loudest voice in the room. If you share a success, a challenge, or a story of personal triumph, they will immediately pivot to make the conversation about themselves. It's never about you. It's always about them and how their experiences are somehow more interesting, more important, or more noteworthy. They'll hijack the conversation with their own accomplishments, often exaggerating or fabricating details to make their lives seem more exciting or glamorous than they really are. This behavior isn't just about the words they use, it's also about the way they interact with people. A bad person thrives in environments where they can constantly be the one with the most attention, admiration, or validation. They will position themselves in such a way that they are always viewed as the expert, the authority, or the person with the most insight, even if they're not. They will put others down or invalidate their opinions, making sure that they come out on top in any given situation. This can be especially draining in professional settings, where they try to assert dominance over others by undermining their ideas, taking credit for work that isn't theirs, or even sabotaging their colleagues' progress. They will use every opportunity to make sure they are the one who is praised, recognized, or rewarded, regardless of who actually deserves it. The emotional toll of this constant undermining is enormous. When you are on the receiving end of this kind of behavior, it's easy to start questioning your own worth. You may find yourself doubting your accomplishments or feeling as though you're never good enough, no matter how much you try. This can lead to anxiety, depression, or a general sense of dissatisfaction with your life. It becomes incredibly difficult to maintain your confidence when you are constantly surrounded by someone who is chipping away at your self-esteem, making you feel like your best isn't enough. The worst part is that it's all done in a way that can be difficult to pinpoint or confront because the bad person often masks their behavior behind a facade of friendliness or concern. They will act like they are just being honest or helping you see things from a different perspective, but in reality, they are just finding ways to make themselves feel superior. In personal relationships, this dynamic can be particularly damaging. A bad person might tear down their partner, friends, or family members because they feel threatened by their successes or happiness. They will belittle their partner's accomplishments, make snide comments about their appearance, or criticize their choices to keep them from feeling good about themselves. They may even resort to emotional manipulation to keep their partner dependent on them, ensuring that they're the one who is always in control. In these relationships, the victim can end up feeling trapped in a cycle of self-doubt and low self-esteem, believing that they can never be good enough or worthy of love and admiration unless they conform to the bad person's vision of what they should be. A bad person's need to tear others down is not just about creating space for themselves at the top, it's about keeping others beneath them. They can only feel powerful if they see others as weak, inferior, or less capable. This pattern of behavior is deeply toxic and can leave lasting scars on those who are affected by it, creating an environment of constant competition, comparison, and devaluation. One of the most damaging traits of a bad person is their ability to gaslight others. Gaslighting is a form of psychological manipulation where the manipulator causes someone to doubt their own perception of reality, memory, or sanity. It's a tactic that can be hard to detect, especially when it's subtle, but over time it wears down a person's sense of self and their ability to trust their own judgment. Gaslighting is toxic because it makes the victim feel confused, insecure, and even crazy while the manipulator remains in control, often without ever having to take responsibility for their actions. It's a form of emotional abuse that doesn't always leave physical marks, but can leave deep, lasting scars on a person's self-esteem and mental health. A classic example of gaslighting is when someone denies something they've said or done, even if there's concrete evidence to the contrary. They might tell you, "That never happened," or "You're just remembering it wrong," even though you clearly recall the event. They will insist that their version of reality is the truth, and they'll make you feel like you're losing your grip on what's real. Over time, these constant denials can make you question your memory, your feelings, and your own sanity. You may find yourself apologizing for things you never did, or doubting your own thoughts, all because the gaslighter has created a false narrative that makes you feel as though you can't trust yourself. This tactic doesn't just involve outright lying, it also includes minimizing your experiences and emotions to make you feel like they are invalid. If you express concern about something they did, they might tell you you're overreacting or you're too sensitive. These dismissive comments serve to downplay your feelings, making you feel like you're the one at fault for feeling hurt, upset, or confused. The gaslighter uses this approach to shift the focus away from their harmful actions and put the blame on you for having an emotional response to them. It's a way to manipulate the situation and avoid accountability while simultaneously making you feel like you are the one who's unreasonable. A bad person who gaslights will often twist the truth in ways that make you second-guess not just what they did, but your entire perception of the situation. For instance, if you confront them about a lie, they might not just deny it, they might go a step further and say, "I never said that. You're just imagining things. I think you're the one who's confused." The more they do this, the more you begin to doubt your own reality. You start to question whether you misunderstood, whether you've been too emotional, or whether you're just paranoid. It's a slow process of erosion where the manipulator chips away at your confidence, leaving you vulnerable and unsure of yourself. In some cases, gaslighting can also involve the manipulator making you feel responsible for their bad behavior. For example, they might say things like, "If you hadn't said that, I wouldn't have reacted that way," or "I wouldn't have lied to you if you had just trusted me." In these moments, the gaslighter shifts the blame onto you, suggesting that you are somehow the cause of their actions. This is particularly insidious because it makes you feel guilty for things that aren't your fault, leading you to internalize the idea that you are the problem, not them. It's a cruel and calculating tactic that keeps the gaslighter in control while leaving you in a state of constant self-doubt. Gaslighting often extends beyond simple conversations and can permeate all aspects of a relationship. In a romantic relationship, for instance, a gaslighter might accuse you of being overly suspicious or paranoid when you express concerns about their behavior. If they've been lying or cheating, they will twist your words and make you feel like you're overreacting. Or they'll accuse you of being untrusting. They may even go as far as to accuse you of being the one who is lying, flipping the situation completely. This not only causes confusion, but also isolates you from the truth. Over time, the gaslighter's narrative becomes so entrenched in your mind that you might start to feel like you can't trust your own instincts or emotions anymore. The emotional toll of gaslighting is profound. It creates a sense of powerlessness as the gaslighter systematically erodes your ability to trust your judgment. It leads to self-doubt, anxiety, and often depression because the victim feels like they are constantly questioning their own reality. In some cases, gaslighting can even lead to a person feeling like they're losing their mind because they've been manipulated for so long. It can take a significant toll on a person's mental health, and the effects can be long-lasting. Victims of gaslighting often end up feeling isolated because they're convinced no one else would understand their experience, or they fear that others will think they are overreacting. This tactic is especially effective when the gaslighter has positioned themselves as a trusted figure in the victim's life. Whether it's a romantic partner, a close friend, or a family member, gaslighters often operate within a dynamic where their influence is so deeply embedded that the victim is unable to see the manipulation. The more emotionally invested you are in the relationship, the harder it is to recognize the signs of gaslighting. You might feel compelled to stay in the relationship believing that it's your responsibility to fix the situation or that you're simply misunderstanding things. This makes it even easier for the manipulator to continue their cycle of deceit. In professional settings, gaslighting can be particularly harmful as well. A toxic colleague or boss might use gaslighting tactics to undermine your work or your credibility. They might take credit for your ideas, deny that you contributed to a project, or even accuse you of making mistakes you didn't make. When you try to bring these issues to light, they might deny their actions or tell you that you're not remembering things correctly. They may even try to make you feel like you're imagining the problem or that you're being too sensitive. The constant manipulation can lead to confusion, frustration, and a diminished sense of self-worth, especially when your contributions are consistently dismissed or stolen. The worst part of gaslighting is that it's a slow, insidious process. It doesn't happen all at once, but over time it chips away at your confidence and your sense of reality. You may not even realize you're being gaslighted until you're already deep in the cycle. Recognizing it is the first step toward breaking free, but even then, it can be difficult to navigate because the gaslighter has created such a warped perception of reality. However, once you are able to identify it, the process of reclaiming your self-worth and rebuilding your trust in yourself can begin. It's a painful process, but it's possible to regain your confidence and find clarity, especially when you understand that the manipulation was never about you. It was about the gaslighter's need for control. A bad person often lacks empathy or genuine care for others. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another person, to put oneself in their shoes and respond with kindness, compassion, and support. Without this fundamental human quality, a person's interactions with others can become cold, self-serving, and manipulative. When someone lacks empathy, they are unable to connect with the pain, struggles, or joys of others, and they often fail to consider how their actions affect those around them. Instead, they operate in a self-centered world where their needs, desires, and emotions take precedence over everything else. This inability to empathize is one of the most significant signs of a bad person, and it manifests in various ways that can be deeply hurtful to those they interact with. One of the most noticeable behaviors of a person who lacks empathy is their tendency to disregard the emotions of others. They may not acknowledge your feelings when you're going through something difficult, or they may minimize your struggles by saying things like, "It's not a big deal," or "You're overreacting." In situations where you're vulnerable or in need of support, they will often be dismissive, making you feel like your feelings are invalid or unimportant. Instead of offering comfort, understanding, or assistance, they might turn the conversation back to themselves or simply ignore your needs altogether. This lack of emotional recognition can make you feel isolated, as though your emotional experience doesn't matter to them at all. For example, if you're upset about something that's deeply personal to you, such as the loss of a loved one or a challenging life situation, a person who lacks empathy might respond by saying, "Well, that happens to everyone," or "You'll get over it." They may even try to make you feel guilty for feeling the way you do, implying that your emotions are somehow excessive or inappropriate. This behavior reveals that they are not capable of truly understanding what you're going through, and instead, they're focused on diminishing your experience. They might see your pain as an inconvenience, and rather than offering comfort, they deflect or belittle the situation. Another sign of a lack of empathy is the inability to show genuine concern for the well-being of others. A bad person may act as if they care about your situation when in reality they have no real interest in helping or supporting you. They might ask you how you're doing, but their follow-up actions or lack thereof reveal that they are only concerned with appearing caring, not actually being there for you. This superficial interest in your life can feel empty and hollow, especially when you're in need of real emotional connection. They may listen to your problems, but their responses will often be shallow, such as offering quick, unhelpful advice, changing the subject abruptly, or offering a solution when what you really need is someone to simply listen and understand. This lack of empathy is also evident in how they treat others in their presence. A bad person may mistreat or ignore people in distress, showing no compassion for those who are vulnerable or suffering. They may make cruel or heartless comments about people going through tough times, mocking their struggles or laughing at their misfortune. This can be especially hurtful when they do it in a public setting where others witness their lack of compassion. In these situations, They may even show disdain for people who seek help or support, seeing them as weak or inferior rather than people deserving of care and understanding. When they witness someone in pain, their response is often one of indifference or cruelty, which underscores their inability to feel or respond to another person's suffering in a meaningful way. A person who lacks empathy may also have a tendency to manipulate others for their own gain without any regard for the emotional cost. They might use people for their own advantage, exploiting their trust or kindness to get what they want. When they are finished with a person, they may discard them without a second thought, showing no remorse or concern for how their actions affect the other person. This manipulative behavior is often driven by self-interest, with no genuine care for the emotional consequences of their actions. They may apologize only when it serves their purposes or when they need something from the other person, but their apologies are rarely sincere. They don't feel the weight of their words or actions. They simply know how to say what is necessary to maintain their position or get what they want. The absence of empathy also shows up in how they respond to the emotions or struggles of those they claim to care about. For example, if a family member or partner is upset or in pain, a bad person might not offer comfort or understanding. Instead, they may get frustrated or irritated, thinking that the person is being too sensitive or making a fuss over nothing. They might even resent having to deal with someone else's emotions, seeing it as a burden or inconvenience. This lack of care for others' emotional needs can create a toxic environment where people feel unsupported, uncared for, and alone in their struggles. When someone cannot understand or connect with the emotions of others, they create a barrier that prevents genuine closeness, trust, and intimacy from developing. In a professional environment, someone who lacks empathy may disregard the feelings of colleagues, clients, or subordinates. They may be quick to criticize, dismissive of feedback, or unwilling to provide necessary support. This can create a work culture where people feel undervalued, disrespected, or ignored. A bad person may act like they're in charge, prioritizing their own success at the expense of others. They may take credit for work that isn't theirs or criticize others without offering constructive feedback or assistance. They may undermine their coworkers' ideas or contributions, creating a toxic and competitive atmosphere rather than a collaborative, supportive one. Their lack of empathy makes it difficult for them to foster strong, healthy relationships at work, leading to burnout and frustration among those around them. Sometimes the lack of empathy in a bad person is rooted in a deep-seated selfishness or narcissism. They are so focused on their own needs and desires that they are completely oblivious to how their actions affect others. They may not even realize how hurtful their behavior can be because they are consumed with their own wants, often to the detriment of everyone else. They might view others as tools to help them achieve their goals, rather than as individuals with their own thoughts, feelings, and needs. This constant self-centeredness can create a dynamic where others feel like they are invisible, unimportant, or constantly underappreciated. In relationships, this lack of empathy often manifests in emotional neglect. A partner who lacks empathy may fail to recognize when the other person is struggling emotionally, or may fail to provide the support and care needed in difficult times. They might act dismissively when their partner expresses vulnerability, or may prioritize their own desires over their partner's well-being. This creates an unbalanced dynamic where one person's needs are consistently neglected, leading to feelings of resentment, loneliness, and frustration. Over time, the relationship becomes one-sided, with the person who lacks empathy taking without giving, leaving the other person drained and emotionally exhausted. Without empathy, a bad person's relationships become transactional, and their ability to form genuine connections with others is severely compromised. Their lack of understanding and emotional care creates distance, making it nearly impossible for them to form meaningful bonds or sustain healthy, reciprocal relationships. As a result, those around them often feel used, neglected, or devalued, leading to a cycle of emotional detachment and disconnection that affects both the manipulator and their victims. A bad person often exhibits a pattern of chronic dishonesty. This isn't just about telling occasional lies or stretching the truth in certain situations. It's a deep-seated habit of fabricating stories, manipulating facts, and deliberately misleading others. The purpose of these lies is often not to protect someone or avoid minor inconveniences, but to maintain control, cover up their wrongdoings, or manipulate people into believing things that benefit them. A bad person lies not just for personal gain, but often to create a false narrative that aligns with their desires, their ego, or their agenda, even at the expense of others. Their dishonesty becomes a means to achieve whatever goal they have, regardless of who gets hurt in the process. At the core of their dishonesty is the need to avoid accountability. When confronted with a mistake or wrongdoing, they won't admit their fault. Instead, they will deny any involvement, deflect blame, or offer a web of lies to cover their tracks. For instance, if they break something, they will deny it, shift the blame onto someone else, or fabricate a story about how it happened. They might say, "I didn't do that, someone must have moved it," or "it was already broken when I saw it." These lies serve to protect their image, to avoid facing the consequences of their actions, and to deflect any responsibility onto others. This refusal to be truthful keeps them in a position of denial, allowing them to move forward without dealing with the repercussions of their behavior. Dishonesty also manifests in more subtle, manipulative ways. A bad person might manipulate the truth to gain sympathy or control over others. They might exaggerate their experiences, making themselves appear more successful, more victimized, or more important than they truly are. They often craft elaborate stories about their past, their achievements, or their struggles to gain admiration or to make others feel guilty. For example, they may tell a sob story about their childhood, pretending to have had a difficult upbringing in order to garner sympathy or justify their current behavior. These fabricated tales are designed to manipulate the emotions of others, leading them to feel pity, guilt, or admiration when none of it is deserved. They rely on these lies to shape how others perceive them, playing on people's emotions to get what they want. Even in everyday interactions, the lies can be small but significant. A bad person might lie about trivial things, not because it's necessary, but because they feel the need to keep up appearances. They may lie about where they were, what they did, or who they were with, even when it doesn't matter. These constant small lies create a pattern of deceit, and over time, it becomes clear that they cannot be trusted. They might tell you, "I was at the store," when in reality they were out with friends, or "I finished the report," when they haven't even started it. These lies are designed to cover up their lack of responsibility or to avoid facing the consequences of their actions. They often don't care whether they are caught in the lie. What matters is that they are able to control the narrative, even if it's at the expense of truth. One of the more destructive aspects of a bad person's dishonesty is their ability to manipulate others by creating confusion. They might tell conflicting stories to different people, keeping everyone off balance and uncertain about what's true. This creates an environment of distrust, where no one can be sure who is telling the truth. They thrive in this atmosphere as it makes it harder for people to come together and confront the lies. If you catch them in a lie, they will usually have a quick excuse or a new story to cover up their tracks, often making you question your own perception of reality. This constant shifting of facts and stories keeps those around them guessing, unsure of where they stand. A bad person will often use lies to manipulate relationships, particularly when they want to control how people see them. They might lie to a partner or friend to keep them from knowing the truth about a situation, using deceit to maintain power and control in the relationship. For example, they might hide their actions or whereabouts, lie about their intentions, or fabricate reasons for their behavior in order to avoid confrontation or accountability. They might tell their partner, "I'm just doing this to help you," when in reality they are only acting out of self-interest. They play on the trust of others to hide their true motives, ensuring that people continue to see them in a positive light, even when their actions are anything but positive. The lies a bad person tells are often part of a larger strategy to maintain a facade of perfection, superiority, or innocence. They might present themselves as the victim of a situation when in reality they are the aggressor. They could accuse others of lying, manipulation, or dishonesty when in fact they are the ones engaging in these behaviors. This projection of blame onto others is a tactic used to deflect attention from their own wrongdoings. If they can convince others that they are the ones being wronged, they can avoid facing the reality of their own lies and manipulations. This type of projection keeps them in control, allowing them to avoid scrutiny while making others feel guilty or defensive. What makes their dishonesty even more dangerous is their ability to deceive over long periods of time. A bad person is often skilled in weaving stories that are plausible enough to be believable. They know how to appeal to your emotions, how to exploit your weaknesses, and how to manipulate your perception of reality. This makes it difficult to detect their lies because they come across as convincing and authoritative. Over time, their web of lies can become so intricate that it is hard to untangle, leaving others in a state of confusion and doubt. It becomes a battle of wits, where the person with the most lies wins, and the truth becomes harder and harder to uncover. Even when confronted with the truth, a bad person's reaction to being caught in a lie is often one of deflection or further manipulation. They may deny the lie altogether, double down on their story, or try to discredit the person pointing out the lie. They may even gaslight the other person, making them feel like they are imagining things or overreacting. The goal is to avoid being held accountable for the lie and to maintain their position of power in the situation. This constant evasion and dishonesty leave those around them feeling powerless and frustrated, unable to trust their own perceptions or the words of the liar. In relationships, whether personal or professional, chronic dishonesty erodes trust, making it nearly impossible to maintain healthy, genuine connections. Trust is built on truth, transparency, and mutual respect. And once a person has demonstrated a pattern of dishonesty, it becomes difficult, if not impossible, to rebuild that trust. The damage done by a bad person's lies is deep and long-lasting, and while they may continue to manipulate and deceive, they leave behind a trail of hurt, confusion, and broken relationships. A bad person often exhibits a pattern of exploiting others for their personal gain without regard for the emotional or psychological cost to those they use. They view relationships, whether personal or professional, as transactions, where the other person is nothing more than a resource to be used and discarded when no longer useful. These individuals do not form genuine connections or bonds with others. Instead, they manipulate, deceive, and take advantage of people to further their own needs, desires, or ambitions. This exploitation can be subtle or overt, but the underlying motive is always the same: to use others as a means to an end without consideration for their well-being or the consequences of their actions. One of the most telling signs of exploitation is when a person repeatedly takes advantage of someone's kindness, generosity, or trust. A bad person will use someone's goodwill to gain access to resources, information, or emotional support without ever reciprocating in kind. They may pretend to care about someone, offering superficial praise or affection, but only because they want something from that person. Once they've extracted what they need, they may disappear or show no interest in the other person's needs or feelings. This creates a one-sided, toxic dynamic, where the exploited person is left feeling used and discarded, while the exploiter walks away with the benefits. In relationships, this pattern of exploitation can take on many forms. A bad person might repeatedly ask for favors, time, or emotional energy, but when it's their turn to offer support, they are nowhere to be found. They might always expect their partner, friend, or family member to give, but they never offer anything in return. This imbalance can leave the other person feeling drained, unappreciated, and neglected. The exploiter takes advantage of their vulnerability, knowing that the other person's empathy or kindness will lead them to offer help, even when it's not reciprocated. They exploit their victim's goodwill without ever feeling guilty or acknowledging the unfairness of their actions. Sometimes this exploitation is more calculated. A bad person might intentionally position themselves in someone's life to gain power, control, or access to certain opportunities. For example, they might forge a relationship with someone in a higher position at work with the goal of using that person's influence to climb the corporate ladder or gain recognition. They may feign friendship only to manipulate the situation for their own benefit, taking credit for others' work or positioning themselves in the right place at the right time to take advantage of a situation. In this case, their primary concern is not building a genuine relationship, but using people as stepping stones to advance their own agenda. Exploitation can also happen in more subtle ways. A bad person might use guilt to manipulate others into doing things for them. They might make someone feel responsible for their happiness, success, or well-being, creating a sense of obligation that the other person feels compelled to fulfill. This can be especially damaging in familial or romantic relationships where the manipulator uses emotional blackmail to get their way. For instance, they might say things like, "If you really loved me, you would do this for me," or "I've done so much for you, the least you can do is help me out." By leveraging guilt, they create a situation where the other person feels morally bound to help, even if it goes against their own best interest. In professional settings, exploitation can take on a more insidious form. A bad person might take advantage of their position of power or authority to manipulate their subordinates or colleagues. They may ask their employees to work excessive hours without proper compensation, or they might take credit for the work and ideas of others, leaving those around them feeling undervalued and invisible. They may also manipulate situations to gain personal benefits, such as promoting themselves at the expense of others or taking advantage of their colleagues' weaknesses to further their own career. In these cases, the exploiter sees their co-workers as tools to be used, not as collaborators or equals, creating an environment of inequality and resentment. What makes exploitation particularly harmful is that it's often disguised as something else. A bad person will rarely be open about their intentions or motives. They are adept at presenting themselves as caring, generous, or selfless, all while hiding their true purpose. This makes it difficult for others to recognize their behavior, especially at first. The manipulator will use charm, flattery, and emotional appeals to gain the trust of their target, making it hard for the other person to realize they are being used. This deceptive behavior often leads to a sense of betrayal when the truth finally comes to light. The exploited person may feel foolish for having trusted the manipulator, or they may feel angry for having been taken advantage of for so long. Over time, the effects of being exploited can be deeply damaging. The victim may begin to lose their sense of self-worth. As they are repeatedly used and discarded, they may become emotionally drained, feeling like they are giving and giving with nothing in return. This emotional exhaustion can lead to a sense of disillusionment and resentment as the victim realizes that their kindness, trust, or love has been taken for granted. In some cases, they may even start to question their own judgment, wondering why they allowed themselves to be exploited in the first place. This internal conflict can further compound the emotional toll, leading to feelings of confusion and self-doubt. Exploitation also creates a sense of powerlessness in the victim. The manipulator's actions often leave the other person feeling as though they have no control over their own life or decisions. They may feel trapped in the relationship, unable to break free from the cycle of manipulation and deceit. The exploiter may make them feel guilty for wanting to say no, or they might use threats or intimidation to maintain control. The longer this dynamic persists, the harder it becomes for the victim to escape as the manipulator works to reinforce their hold on the other person. Ultimately, exploitation is a hallmark of a bad person because it reveals a complete disregard for the well-being of others. A good person builds relationships based on mutual respect, trust, and care, but a bad person sees others as nothing more than tools to serve their own interests. This mindset not only harms those who are directly exploited, but also creates an environment where manipulation and selfishness are normalized, making it harder for healthy, authentic relationships to thrive. The consequences of exploitation can be long-lasting, leaving emotional scars that take time to heal. The manipulator, however, remains largely unaffected, having used others for their own benefit without ever acknowledging the harm they caused. In conclusion, bad people possess certain traits that consistently harm and manipulate those around them. From gaslighting and dishonesty to a lack of empathy and the exploitation of others for personal gain, these behaviors reveal a deep disregard for others' well-being. The underlying theme of these traits is control. Bad people seek to dominate their relationships, often at the expense of trust, respect, and mutual care. They twist the truth, create confusion, and use guilt to manipulate, all while maintaining a facade of innocence or victimhood. Recognizing these behaviors is crucial for protecting yourself and others from being taken advantage of. It's important to trust your instincts and set boundaries with people who exhibit these harmful traits. Healthy relationships are based on mutual respect, transparency, and care for one another's emotional and mental well-being. If you find yourself surrounded by someone who constantly undermines your reality, manipulates your emotions, or exploits your kindness, it's essential to step back, assess the situation, and consider your options. You deserve to be surrounded by people who uplift and support you, not those who use and discard you when it suits their needs. The good news is that recognizing these signs gives you the power to make informed decisions. Once you understand the characteristics of a bad person, you can guard your energy, protect your peace, and foster more authentic, loving relationships with those who genuinely care for you. It may take time to break free from the influence of such individuals, but reclaiming your sense of self and your right to healthy connections is worth every effort. By empowering yourself with knowledge and awareness, you set the foundation for a life filled with honesty, respect, and mutual growth, leaving behind the toxic people who try to hold you back.